fearlessly talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Monday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. You know, I'll be transparent. Love doing this show. Grateful to do this show. Felt like we were reaching for some content here over the last couple weeks. Well, I'll tell you what, no reaching today. SEC Media Days is here, and we got a ton to react to. Greg Sankey speaks. I think he said some interesting things about both college football playoff expansion as well as the NCAA tournament. Brian Kelly, don't want to say he's feeling the heat, but sort of feeling the heat. Lane Kiffin, this wild Hugh Freeze back and forth. We got to discuss that. From there, did you see this story? Nick Saban coming back to coaching. Greg McElroy thinks so. We'll discuss that. Then from there, listen, we're going to transition a little bit out of college hoops, but at the same time, man, this was a busy weekend in college hoops recruiting, and we're going to discuss all of the big storylines, everything you need to know. Where was Dan Hurley? Where was John Calipari? Where was John Shire, Mark Pope, etc.? There is a lot to discuss. Before we get started, really quickly, make sure you're subscribed. Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. On this YouTube page, listen, new clips, new videos going up every single day. We really do appreciate your support. Also, the podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, so make sure to subscribe. By the way, the college football betting YouTube channel, we have started our team-by-team uploads, our team-by-team previews there, so make sure to check that out as well. Producer Matt, you could drop the link later on in the show. Appreciate nobody showing up for the beginning of this show. Not nobody as in nobody, but nobody as in our favorite listener. We appreciate you. But listen, it's mid-July, but there was a lot to discuss from Monday afternoon. There is no more time to waste. So let's get to the topic of the day. Topic of the day, it is SEC Media Days. Listen, we made it, people. You know, we ground through a lot of slow days in May, June, and July to get us here. But SEC Media Days has begun. I don't know that we'll be able to do a show every single day this week to react to what happened, but thought Monday was a relatively newsworthy day. The 4 teams that were there were LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, and Vandy. We will get to some of what they said in a minute, but do think it was kind of interesting. This event opens every single year with Greg Sankey kind of doing a State of the Union in college sports, and certainly with the House settlement, with NIL, but also with college football playoff expansion and NCAA tournament expansion. We talked about that, both potentially on the horizon. It felt like an especially important conversation, an especially important press availability for Greg Sankey. The one thing I could criticize his individual stances on things, but he gets to the podium, he answers questions, and he did that on Monday. And to me, I really think the 2 most important things he discussed, these are 2 big picture issues that are going on in college sports that need to be discussed, and it is college football playoff expansion and NCAA tournament expansion. So let's get into some of what Greg Sankey said on the day. To me, we could talk NCAA tournament in a minute. We did that last week. I think it's really interesting where we are with college football playoff expansion. Now, if you follow this show, you know I think expanding this thing beyond 12 is idiotic, but it feels like there is very much a line in the sand between what Greg Sankey and the SEC think and what the Big Ten and Tony Petitti, the commissioner of that conference, thinks. Greg Sankey, I think the SEC kind of wants that 5-11 model, so basically 5 conference champions, 11 at-large bids. That is the preferred stance of the Big 12. I assume it's the preferred stance of what the ACC will say as well when they have their media availability here in a couple days. The Big Ten has this completely different stance that I don't really understand. They kind of want that crazy 4-4-2-2-1 model. 4 auto bids for the SEC, 4 auto bids for the Big Ten, 2 for the ACC, 2 for the Big 12, 1 for the Group of 5, with 3 at-large bids. And then, oh, by the way, they want this weird play-in thing to get teams into the college football playoff. So in other words, like, and I hope I'm going to explain this well because I know I'm going in a lot of different directions early, but essentially like the 3 seed in the SEC would play the 6 seed to get an auto bid. The 4 seed would play the 5 seed. It's very confusing. It's very convoluted. It doesn't make sense to me. And oh, by the way, if you're going to have at-large bids on top of that, well, if you're the 3 seed, what do you care about beating the 6 seed? You're going to get in anyway. So it doesn't really make sense, but it seems like there is a line in the sand. And this to me was the first kind of big thing that Greg Sankey talked about. Producer Matt, you can pop those Nicole Auerbach tweets because I thought there was some interesting context from Greg Sankey. He basically acknowledged, according to everybody there, that we have a 12-team playoff with 5 conference champions that we can stay in if we don't agree. And he basically said, I think there's this notion that there has to be some magic moment and something has to happen with expansion and it has to be forced. You're given authority. You want to be responsible using that authority. So to me, listen, this isn't a 15-minute topic. We're going to bounce around to what happened in the SEC Media Days on Monday, but it's an interesting statement, right? Because I think what Greg Sankey is saying there is, I think everybody from the outside, I include myself, I include other media members, whatever, we all sit there and just kind of assume it's like, oh, there's going to be some secret meeting and it's going to be like the Pope. There's going to be smoke coming out of a chimney and we're going to get a 16-team college football playoff that everybody agrees on. And what Greg Sankey is basically saying is we might not ever get that moment. And if we don't get that moment, we don't have to have expansion. And so that was the first thing that seemed interesting to me is I think we were all under the assumption that this college football playoff expansion is like days, weeks away from officially happening. We're eventually going to get to 16 and we are eventually going to get to 16. But what I find equally as interesting is the notion that it might take longer to get there. The other thing I was thinking about really quick is to get to 12. Do we remember the process to get to 12 a few years ago? Because a few years ago, when we got to 12, it wasn't the conference commissioners kept arguing about it, couldn't decide, didn't know what to do. And eventually it was the school presidents that stepped in and were just like, no, we're going to a 12-team college football playoff, deal with it, figure it out. And from there, it got done. And so I guess that's the first big takeaway. By the way, if I'm picking sides in Petitti versus Sankey, SEC versus Big Ten, I actually agree with Sankey. I don't love the idea of what would that be, 13 automatic bids into the college football play. What's even the point of playing the regular season? And again, I understand there's this concept of a play-in to the playoff if you're not one of those top 2 teams. But to me, it just makes it more convoluted. If you're going to have at-larges, then again, if you're, let's just use a hypothetical. Tennessee plays Ole Miss as the 4-5 game. Well, let's say Tennessee's quarterback is banged up or Ole Miss's quarterback is banged up. If you know you're getting in one of the, it doesn't make sense. So anyway, I just think that was the interesting first takeaway is that I think we all expected college football playoff expansion to be on the horizon, and it might be, but it doesn't feel like people are going to acquiesce. And if people aren't comfortable with the format, that we might actually get a situation where we don't get college football playoff expansion anytime soon. So that was thought number 1. Thought number 2, very interesting. We talked about this last week, so we won't spend a ton of time on it, but the college basketball NCAA tournament expansion conversation. Okay, so if you remember last week, we did talk a little bit about this, but I thought Matt Norlander from CBS Sports did a great job of leading the charge basically on, hey, there's this vote coming down on college basketball NCAA tournament expansion, and I don't think a lot of people are paying attention to it. And he did a great article on why we shouldn't expand the tournament. Dan Wetzel did an article. Pat Forty did an article. And I only bring it up because last week, I think partly because of the public pressure, the college football or college basketball powers that be basically said, you know what, we're going to table this. We'll revisit it later in the summer, because I think they knew that most people do not want college basketball NCAA tournament expansion to 72 or 76 teams. Regular season is watered down enough. There's enough bad team. North Carolina got in last year. They stunk. They beat nobody, okay? San Diego State, whatever. You get the point. Well, I bring it up because that has been put on the back burner. But Sankey, to his credit, did actually address this issue as well. And one thing I'll say about Sankey, because we mentioned Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, Petitti doesn't really do media. He did a media availability with Joel Klatt from Fox. Of course, Fox has all the Big Ten games, so he's kind of beholden to doing something with Fox. But I only bring it up because Greg Sankey, you could criticize him for whatever, but he is out there. He is available. He answers questions. Listen, he did this podcast at the Final Four. We talked to Greg Sankey at the NCAA tournament at the Final Four in San Antonio. So I only bring it up because he was asked about this, and he did share his opinion, and he didn't duck from it. Producer Matt, you can pop up the statement from Greg Sankey on college basketball NCAA tournament expansion. This is what he said. And this was a direct quote from his personal Twitter page. He obviously was not tweeting as he was speaking, but some representative was. He said, this is what he said. In general, we support bracket expansion for both the men's and women's tournaments. Nothing in college basketball is static, so tournament expansion is worth exploring. We think there are enough quality teams across the country to merit giving this growth full consideration. To be clear, we support expansion, but will be fine if finances, planning, broadcast opportunities, or competitive realities do not justify growth. So basically what he just said there was, yeah, we kind of want it, but like this isn't, and maybe it's because of the college football playoff expansion, like this isn't like the number one priority. Producer Matt, actually do me a favor, pop that back up really quick because I just want to be able to look at it and react to it a little bit in real time. Again, he said we support bracket expansion. Nothing in college basketball is static. We think there are enough quality teams to merit expansion. To be clear, we support expansion, but we'll be fine if it doesn't prove kind of worthy. Again, let me put it this way. I do disagree with Greg Sankey. We certainly do not need more teams in the tournament. By the way, I think part of the reason that it's hard for him to go hard in the paint about we have to expand the NCAA tournament, the SEC just got 14 teams in, but I think that speaks to, like, if any conference can get 14 teams, I don't care if it's a 16-team league, an 18-team league, the superpower era, the super conference era, whatever, you can get 14 teams in. It shows something that we talked about last week, that this thing is already so tilted in favor of the power conferences that to me, expansion doesn't make sense. And we went over this last week. If you missed Wednesday's show, I believe we talked about this. So I'm not going to relitigate the whole thing because we got a lot to get to today. But at the same time, I bring it up because in my opinion, what this does say is that the arguments for college football playoff expansion or college basketball NCAA tournament expansion, they don't even make sense, right? If the argument is, by the way, I guess Lane Kiffin's going off again. We'll get to Lane Kiffin in a minute. But I bring it up because if the argument is there's not enough access, it's like, well, the SEC just got 14 teams in, so you can't say there's no access. Everything is tilted towards the NCAA, towards the power conferences as is. And beyond that, I just go back to, I think anything that hurts the regular season, college basketball's regular season is watered down enough. I love college basketball, but I know many of you find it to be largely irrelevant. Well, adding 8 teams or adding 4 teams makes it even worse. By the way, this is a little bit of my concern with college football playoff expansion as well. So to me, it sounds like he realizes that they have bigger fish to fry, but I give him credit. Like he said that we are in favor of this. I do disagree. I found the part funny where he said, everything else in college basketball is worth debate, but this somehow isn't. Greg, I love you, buddy. This is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing people care about. Nobody cares about, the trapezoid lane versus the regular lane. Nobody cares about a 30-second shot clock versus a 24-second shot clock. Everybody cares about you and the powers that be trying to ruin the worst postseason event we have in sports. So let's leave NCAA tournament as is. I don't know if it will happen, but I do acknowledge that I can't be mad at Greg Sankey for at least sharing his thoughts on what he believes his stance is on on NCAA tournament expansion. I can disagree, but I appreciate him not ducking it. I appreciate him. It could have been easy for him to just go up to the podium and lie his brains out. No, we love 68. Don't move it. Don't do anything. And then behind the scenes, he's making moves to change it. At least he acknowledges, like, yeah, I'm in favor of changing it, but if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world. So that was probably the most interesting stuff that came out of Greg Sankey. Let's get to some of the other conversations throughout the day. It will be, we'll talk about no, we're not going to talk about all 4 teams, but really quickly, the teams that were there, again, were LSU, South Carolina, Ole Miss, and Vandy. Don't know that there was a ton from South Carolina. I'll say this. I don't know that there was really necessarily a ton from LSU either. I think it's kind of an interesting year for Brian Kelly and the Tigers. I'm not as anti-LSU as everybody else. I'm not as anti-Brian Kelly as everybody else. I've told the story a million times. I was at UConn when he was at Cincinnati. I saw him take a very good program under Mark D'Antonio and make it a great elite program. But I also acknowledge, like, it's year 4. You played in an SEC championship game your first year. Since then, it's been okay, but not great. Last year, you finished 8-4 in the regular season. Your really weird year where, you could have lost a couple games that you ended up winning. You got punked by Texas A&M on the road where they just bullied you. You got destroyed by Alabama off of a bye. And so it is kind of an important year. And I think the big thing with Brian Kelly, hey, you know what would help you not stinking at the end of the year? You got to win in week 1. First 2 years, they play Florida State. First in New Orleans, they lose that game. Then in Orlando, they end up losing that game. Then last year, they play USC in Vegas. They end up losing to USC, and everybody thinks, oh, Lincoln Riley figured it out without Caleb Williams. I know, USC kind of stunk. So I bring it up because LSU needs to get off to a hot start. The issue is, you all remember where they opened their season this year? Can someone get Brian Kelly, an FCS team, in week 1? They are playing at Clemson in week 1 of the college football season. Brian Kelly asked if anything is different this offseason about his preparation. Here's what he had to say.
We talked earlier this offseason about circling the Clemson game. How are y'all talking about that first game in a way that's maybe different than you have the past few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've made it a specific goal. Goal setting is something that we're all very familiar with in college football. Everybody talks about goals. We've made this a specific goal, and a specific goal meaning it's tangible for our guys. If you go through our weight room, we've got a Clemson paw print on the bags that we hit every day. It's on every monitor in the building to go 1-0. And I think it was important to have a tangible, specific goal for us to start the season. And I think it's important. Our kids want that.
So that's Brian Kelly talking about the importance of, not losing in week 1. By the way, I see nobody is very active in the chat. Nobody, congrats on your hole-in-one, the first hole-in-one for nobody in his golf career. All right, so Brian Kelly, listen. That sound was probably the most interesting thing. By the way, credit Wilson Alexander with that sound. We appreciate his hard work there in Atlanta for the SEC Media Days. But I bring it up because that sound might sound like silly. And listen, because it's Brian Kelly, people make fun of him. Oh, they got a paw print on their, the sled at LSU. I just bring it up because everyone's going to make fun of him. This, to me, is low-key a pretty important story, okay? Because the bottom line is, listen, I understand that we're in a 12-team playoff era now, and I understand that a week 1 loss doesn't necessarily impact anything. Clemson lost in week 1 to Georgia last year. They end up making the college football playoff. Notre Dame beats Texas A&M, and that kind of propelled them. So the bottom line is, I understand that, and by the way, A&M loses that game. They win 7 straight. They're in the top 10 by the middle of October, okay? But I will say this. I know we're predisposed to like, oh, if you lose in week 1, it's not the end of the season. Look at LSU's schedule, okay? If LSU loses in week 1, which I think they're probably going to, we could preview week 1. We got plenty of time to do that. But the bottom line is, if they lose in week 1, I do think it's going to be an uphill battle for them to make the college football playoff. Last year, no at-large team was worse than 10-2. I know Lane Kiffin, again, is whining about not getting in at 9-3, but nobody worse than 10-2 got in, okay? And so I bring it up because if LSU loses that opener, have you seen the rest of their schedule? Just before the end of September, how about this? They have to go to Ole Miss. They have to play Florida at home. That's before the end of September. Then they have to go to Oklahoma, to Alabama, Texas A&M at home, South Carolina at home. Now, if they go 11-1 after week 1 from there, they will very much earn that college football playoff appearance. If they don't go 11-1, I don't know how they get in. It's just there's going to be too many good teams. And so it is kind of an important week 1 game. And again, I know everyone's predisposed. Oh, don't overreact to week 1. No. You can overreact when you got LSU's schedule. So I thought that was the most interesting thing from LSU. Just gave Greg Sankey some credit for acknowledging his stance on NCAA tournament expansion. Let's give credit to Brian Kelly. It'd be easy for him to duck this. It'd be easier for him to say it's just 1 of 12. It doesn't mean anything more than anything else. But he basically said, yeah, we kind of got to win that one, and we're fully focused on week 1. Lane Kiffin. I don't know what he's fully focused on at all, okay? Because he's had the most interesting offseason probably of any SEC head football coach. By the way, the thing with Brian Kelly, too, it's worth noting. It's year 4. We'll get back to Kiffin in half a second. It's year 4. If he doesn't make the college football playoff this year, I still don't think he's getting fired, but kind of out of excuses. Got all his own guys. They've invested in NIL. They've invested in the kind of player personnel department. So he's got to win, and he's got to win in a hurry. But yeah, Brian Kelly was with that. All right, let's switch gears to Lane Kiffin. So Lane Kiffin comes to SEC Media Day. And as I said, there's certainly nobody that's more active on social media than Lane Kiffin. And it became interesting and it became funny this year because Lane Kiffin all offseason has kind of been going at Hugh Freeze, okay? So if people don't know the backstory on Hugh Freeze, I'll try to be quick, and I'll explain why it's stupid in a minute. But Hugh Freeze and Auburn have the worst recruiting class right now in the SEC for the 2026 cycle. So in other words, guys going into their senior year, Auburn has the worst recruiting class. I saw, and by the way, there are reasons why, which we'll get into in a minute, but the reason that everyone has grasped onto is that Hugh Freeze is playing too much golf. I'm dead serious. If you're not following this story, it's unbelievable. It's so college football in the South, it makes your head hurt. But there is just basically this insinuation that Hugh Freeze doesn't care about recruiting, doesn't care about the 2026 class, and he's just spending all his time on the links. It's stupid. It's idiotic. Hasn't left Lane Kiffin for any shortage of things to tweet about this offseason, because a few weeks ago, Hugh Freeze did, in fact, from the golf course, post a tweet to which Lane Kiffin replied, producer Matt, thank you. Lane Kiffin, great job, coach. Your game is on fire. Okay, so Lane Kiffin not afraid to mix it up. Then on Sunday, I think it was, in the lead up to Media Days, Lane Kiffin posted a tweet and tagged Hugh Freeze where he was on a boat somewhere doing some fishing. So naturally, everybody wanted to know what that was about. And Lane Kiffin got asked about Hugh Freeze and his tweets at Hugh Freeze.
Mail.com. It seemed like in the past week you've had a few tweets tagging or directing at Hugh Freeze. Was curious what the message or thought behind some of those posts were.
Well, someone said that coming in here to me. I like Coach Freeze, so I think they think that was something to do with, like, I was fishing and it was golfing. That really wasn't that. I have a thing with him going back a few years ago, and he posted a picture in response to me of some 2-pound bass or something like that. So I've kind of always posted bigger fish pictures back towards him. So that had nothing to do with his golf game, which sounds like he's doing amazing at that. So that's great for him. And I was fishing yesterday as a dead period, by the way. Just making sure they were clear on that. If people want to say fishing is like golfing, it's dead period.
I love so much about that. Okay. I love so much about that. So first of all, Lane Kiffin, if I told you there's going to be a dust up at SEC Media Days over somebody's tweets about another coach, the minus 10,000 favorite would be Hugh Freeze. That's one, or it would be Lane Kiffin. That's one. Two, on top of that, it is also worth noting, I love the fact that the size of the fish is now the big conversation, okay? They say size matters. Apparently size matters. And apparently Lane Kiffin and Hugh Freeze have this secret back and forth that nobody knew about except Lane Kiffin about the size of the fish that are being posted on social media. I also did, listen, I think the whole thing is dumb, and I'm going to defend Hugh Freeze in half a second. I did think it was pretty funny when Lane Kiffin did say something to the effect of, I'm just happy he's enjoying golf, and he seems to be doing really well. Like, basically the insinuation being like, yeah, he's playing too much. Now, very quickly, let me do something that no one else in the media is going to do. Let me defend Hugh Freeze, okay? And it's not just because, as nobody said in the chat, you can't play too much golf. This Hugh Freeze playing too much golf story is quite literally the dumbest. I've seen some dumb narratives in the history of covering college sports and in the history of SEC football where teams are trying to get digs in at each other. This is the dumbest one, though. Okay, let me explain why. There are I know no one wants to hear it. I know it's not fun for Twitter and message boards as to why Auburn is not recruiting at a very high level. There are actually very logical reasons why. First of all, and Hugh Freeze talked about this, is with the house settlement. I think everybody's a little confused as to what they can do, what they can't do, and some schools are just taking a hands-off approach. Auburn appears to be one. And so Hugh Freeze is basically like, look, man, we could be recruiting better, but we're not going to offer guys stuff that we can't deliver on. And the insinuation is basically there are schools that are offering stuff that you will not be able to deliver on in this house settlement era if you're actually sticking to the $20.5 million cap that everyone is supposed to stick to. And so Hugh Freeze is like, dude, people are offering crazy money still. I'm not getting into that right now. We don't have to get into that right now. And we'll see how this all settles up. By the way, Lane Kiffin, this was an interesting comment that he said. He was asked about a quote unquote hard salary cap in college football. And he basically said the same thing. He said, look, we this is what it's supposed to be. No one's actually going to abide by it. So we'll see how the rules are implemented and what happens if you break the rules. So there's that part of it. Here's the other thing. Here's the big dirty secret as to why Hugh Freeze is not recruiting well this year. It has nothing to do with his golf game. It's because they took two huge recruiting classes in 2023 and 2024. They're or 2024 and 2025, I should say. They were both top 10 in the country. So most of Auburn's roster, if things go well this year, will be back next year. The best players in that program are true sophomores and true juniors true sophomores and true juniors in that program. Cam Coleman is going, no, I take that back. True freshmen and true sophomores in that program. I apologize. The best players are not draft eligible this year. Cam Coleman, I think, might be the second best wide receiver in college football behind Jeremiah Smith. He doesn't have the stats of Ryan Williams, but we'll see if he can be as good. Cam Coleman is not draft eligible this year. DeMarcus Riddick's one of the best defensive players in the SEC. He is not draft eligible this year. You go on and on down the list, some of the guys they got. Remember, they signed a top 10 class last year, and they got most of the best players out of Alabama. So that's why they're not recruiting very many players. They, in theory, don't have very many scholarships to give out. And oh, by the way, I will also acknowledge, Hugh Freeze has to win games this year. And I think why go crazy on the 2026 class if things don't go well? Listen, I don't think there's going to be a coaching change, but I think Hugh Freeze's philosophy, and I haven't talked to him about it, is probably something to the effect of if I win, we'll be able to flip some people. If I don't win, then we're all screwed and I might be looking for a new job. So to me, this is the dumbest story ever. The biggest reason they don't have a big recruiting class is because they had monster classes in 2024 and 2025, and all their best players are not yet draft eligible. And oh, by the way, most of the NIL money that in theory will be used, of the $20.5 million, whatever they get, will go to retaining players, not bringing in new players. So it's a silly narrative. Now, listen, Hugh Freeze does have to win. They got a tough schedule at Baylor to open the season, at A&M, at Oklahoma early, but schedule's there where they can get some wins, especially in the back half of the schedule. It's such a dumb narrative. I'll also say, though, I did enjoy Lane Kiffin having some fun with it. Really quickly, and this one we'll spend 10 seconds on because I want to get to Nick Saban and get to a little college hoop stuff. So Diego Pavia. So Diego Pavia shows up. Producer Matt, you just pop up the picture. We're not going to spend too much time on this. Diego Pavia. Can I just say something? So for people who are listening on audio and don't see it, Diego Pavia shows up in his James Bond 007 tuxedo, okay? He looks cool. He acts cool, whatever. Am I the only one that's kind of over Diego Pavia? And I get it, right? Because bottom line, I get it. He beat Alabama. Awesome. Beat Auburn. Awesome. Beat Auburn the year before at New Mexico State. He deserves credit for all of that. Vandy also went 6-6 last year, and he completed 59% of his passes. Like, we are talking about this kid as if he's Joe Burrow in 2019 because he had one good game against Alabama. And it's just one of these college football things where it's like, it becomes a narrative. It becomes a thing. It becomes a talking point. Oh, Diego Pavia, he's so cool, and he's so different, and he's at Vandy. And it's like, completed 59% of his passes. Second best win after Alabama last year was an Auburn team that did not make a bowl game. So I saw that. I don't blame him. I don't know. I'm so over Diego Pavia. To producer Matt's point, I also do think it probably is putting a little bit of a target on his back. I mean, he's talked smack. He's talked whatever. I'm just so over this guy. Like, I get it. It's cool. He beat Bama. He's a little bit different. He was at JUCO 4 or 5 years ago. We'll see what happens. Vandy went 6-6 last year. Can we stop acting like Vandy went 10-2? They went 6-6. Their second best win outside of Bama was against Auburn. It isn't anything to write home about. It isn't that big of a deal. I know it's Vandy, but let's all chill out. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll stay on college football. Did you see what Greg McElroy, did you see what he said about Nick Saban? Nick Saban coming back to college football as a coach? Former player thinks so. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to get back to the show in a minute. But before we do, I have so many people that reach out and say, Torres, you give me hours and hours and hours of free content every day, every month, every year. What can I do to help support the show? Well, you want to support the show and look good in the process. Make sure to check out and support the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Some of you wondering, what can I get in that merch store, Torres? Well, Kentucky fans, we got our Mark Pope Hope and Pope t-shirts. That is right. Mark Pope, monster first year. Year 2 is going to be even better. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirt at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is coming. It is here. John Calipari has things rocking. Get your Big Pig Invasion tees. Again, aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. St. John's fans, we have our Big Rick Energy t-shirts. And if you're just a college basketball fan in general, guess what? Your March is for Day Drinking shirt. That is the shirt that you need year-round, but especially for the next NCAA tournament. You can order yours now. By the way, football fans, we got you covered too. Auburn fans, we already know the freeze warning has hit the plains. Make sure to get your freeze warning t-shirts. Also, Nebraska fans, new era, new rules, the t-shirt that you need before the start of this coming season. And oh, by the way, if you're a Colorado fan, if you're just a Coach Prime fan, we have our Dion shirts and hats, more of them than we know what to do with. So to check out the full line of Aaron Torres Media merch and also support the show, good news is we're going to have even more for the fall. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And for more information, you can always reach out at Aaron Torres Podcast Questions at gmail.com. All right, everybody. I'm back. Gonna be back. Not gonna lie, internet's getting a little sketchy up here in the Torres household. Also, by the way, chat's quiet. Nobody. We appreciate you. Other people hop on in. We appreciate everybody's support, listening live, coming back and listening, later on, download it on podcast, all of that. You know who else's support we appreciate? The folks at Cauley Puffs. Okay, so I've told you all about Cauley Puffs, but family-owned company, not far from where I live. And Joey, the founder, basically one day was sitting on the couch and he said, you know what? I need a snack that is both healthy but delicious, something my kids are going to like, something I'm going to like. He came up with Cauley Puffs. Baked, not fried, avocado oil, no grease, healthy ingredients. This is the alternative to the crap in your grocery aisle. You don't want the Doritos. You don't want the Fritos. You want to look good this summer. You want to try out Cauley Puffs, okay? Coolest part, best part, the folks at Cauley Puffs want to take care of you. If you're a listener of the Aaron Torres pod, there is a special 15% offer on your purchase when you go to CauliPuffs.com. That's CauliPuffs.com, CauliPuffs.com. You can also search on Amazon.com as well. Just search us on CauliPuffs.com, 15% off, code Torres, Amazon.com as well. We truly do appreciate your support. We truly do appreciate Caulipuff support. You want to try them out for yourself. Promo code Torres for 15% off. Thank you to Caulipuffs. Very quickly, we'll do some college hoops recruiting in just a minute. There was one story that came out of SEC Media Days, though, that I do think is absolutely worth discussing. And it actually involved a gentleman that was not at SEC Media Days that has been at every SEC Media Days, the last 16, 17 years? That's Nick Saban. So Nick Saban, of course, you may have heard of him. 7-time national champion, won a bunch of natties at Alabama, retired a few years ago. I think 7 is right. It might be more than that. Who knows? We all lost track. We all ran out of fingers just like Saban did. But he retires from Alabama. He takes the job at ESPN with College Game Day. He was at SEC Media Days last year. This year, he did not show up. Now, that might not be noteworthy, except for what one of his former players said. So Greg McElroy hosts a very popular radio show in Birmingham, Alabama, Jocks Radio with Cole Kubelik, my buddy. I'll be just transparent. I've been on the show many times, maybe not many, probably half a dozen. And I know Cole. I love Cole. I respect the hell out of Cole. I respect Greg too. I just don't really know him. But I bring it up because apparently there was quite a little bit of a conversation about Nick Saban on that show on Monday morning to lead SEC Media Days. Greg Sankey with Cole Kubelik, and they had Paul Feinbaum as a guest. Well, the topic of Nick Saban came up. Here is what Greg McElroy had to say about his former coach, Nick Saban. Quote, "This is a little bit out of left field, but the question was asked of me. A very much person in the know that I have a lot of respect for and have spent a lot of time around and just really, really admire. They seem to think Nick Saban's not done coaching. I had a similar reaction to you guys. Obviously, the insinuation is they're freaking out. He's pretty adamant that he thinks Nick Saban will be coaching again. Look, if it wasn't someone notable, I would have never said a word." So basically, Greg McElroy saying that someone close to Nick Saban told him that he believes that Nick Saban will, in fact, coach again. It's a heck of a headline. It's a heck of a story. It's a heck of a where could he possibly end up? I'll tell you this. I don't really see it happening. Okay. So listen, listen, first of all, McElroy's really good at what he does. Like I said, I don't really know him other than a few conversations I've had with him on the radio. But the one thing I'll say in his defense, like he is not a look at me, I'm going to say stuff just to make headlines kind of guy. I think if he said that, I truly do believe that the conversation was had with somebody who knows and is in Nick Saban's inner circle. But I do think there's a difference between Nick Saban being like, yeah, I would love to come back and coach college football, and actually doing it. By the way, producer Matt, I did just see the graphic on the screen of Nick Saban with a big question mark on his polo over there. So very good job on that. Look, like I said, there's a big difference between a guy saying, even behind the scenes, man, I miss it, and man, I am definitely coming back. And to me, there's no real explanation at this point as to why he would. 74 years old. Okay. So even God willing, even health-wise, what do you really have? 4 years, 3 years, 5 years? Like, you don't got 15 years left on the runway here. We talk about it with all these guys. Rick Pitino at St. John's. Rick Pitino's in the best shape of any 72-year-old that we've ever seen on planet Earth. But how many more years does he really have left? Belichick. How many years does he have left? But Belichick's coming back at a different inflection point of he just wants to coach. He doesn't care where. And I think Nick Saban's a little bit different. I think the other thing, too, why did Nick Saban leave college football? It was because of the chaos of the portal and NIL. Well, nothing's really changed because that was part of the conversation as well. As I think McElroy said at some point, like, well, now that things are starting to calm down, are things really calming down? One, We still have completely unregulated transfers. Now, again, we're working behind the scenes to try and, regulate that a little bit. But 2, I understand that we have this $20.5 million cap. And, oh, by the way, that's supposed to limit, spending in college football. As we've talked about, it's not going to. It's not going to limit spending in college football. It's not going to limit spending in college basketball. You can't stop filthy rich people, whether it's John Tyson at Arkansas, Cody Campbell at Texas Tech, Jimmy Rain at Auburn, whoever your big boosters are, Joe Kraft at Kentucky, Peter Worth at UConn. That's one of UConn's big boosters. If rich guys and girls want to spend money to make their football and basketball teams good, you can't stop them from doing it. You can't stop John Tyson. If John Tyson believes that some 5-star basketball player, it's worth $2.5 million, $3 million for them to endorse Tyson Chicken, you can't stop them from doing it. Michigan, who's the guy? Larry Ellison from Oracle, that basically him and his wife basically landed Bryce Underwood. If Larry Ellison says, I want to pay Bryce Underwood $5 million a year to endorse Oracle, you can't stop. Like, there's nothing you can do to stop it. So nothing has really changed other than that we've put in another set of rules that's just created another set of problems. The real reason to me, though, I actually couldn't believe this. So Paul Feinbaum was on set when this conversation was happening, and I think Paul Feinbaum somehow became the voice of reason on this topic. Here's what Paul Feinbaum had to say about the situation when he was asked about it. First, he said it's a resounding no, and this is what he said. He said, Greg, you know Nick Saban better than I do, but I ran into somebody the other day who spends time with Saban in Florida, you can imagine where, and said that he is literally having the time of his life, and why wouldn't he? I'm much closer to Nick Saban. I'm much closer to Nick Saban's age than you are, and I can assure you when you have everything you want and you start playing golf at the best golf clubs in America and you start making friends who belong to even better golf clubs and you make a lot of money for doing very little work on TV, the interest in doing what he walked away from is not very high. And this is the money quote to me from Paul Feinbaum. He said, quote, he had a better situation in Alabama the day he left than anywhere he goes. Let's say it's next year. Now, I don't know if it's college or pros. Could he be talked into something in the NFL? But that last part is so important. I don't care about the golf stuff. There's only so much golf you can play. Feinbaum's right, though. Whatever Saban misses about college football, the situation that he left at Alabama is a better situation than anywhere he's going to walk into next year. I mean, first of all, the realistic jobs that are going to be open next year, we got some Kentucky fans in the chat. I'm sure you'd love for Mark Stoops to be gone. I don't even know if you can get rid of Mark Stoops with that buyout, but Kentucky might be open. Don't think Nick Saban, with due respect, is rushing to be the next Kentucky Wildcats head coach. Arkansas, I know we said John Tyson's got a lot of money. I don't care how much chicken money there is out there. You can't convince Nick Saban to be the Arkansas head football coach. I don't see it. Florida State, I guess, could open. That's sort of intriguing. Florida State's kind of broke. I mean, they just are. They don't have the money to compete with the top schools in America. So you're going to pay Nick Saban $10 million a year and then, fully fund that $20.5 million plus whatever it takes on the side? Doesn't really add up. The one I will say, well, by the way, Auburn in theory could open up. Sorry, producer Matt. I don't think Nick Saban's going to Auburn. I mean, maybe he's a sick, twisted little puppy more than I thought. But I don't think he's going to Auburn. The only one that I think actually would be kind of interesting, like if Brian Kelly actually bottomed out this year at LSU, like if he went 5-7, which I don't think is going to happen. But again, given the schedule, I don't think it's like totally out of the realm of possibility. Like if Brian Kelly was terrible, I guess maybe I could see LSU. But again, is LSU's going to have to pay $60 million guaranteed to get Brian Kelly out of there? It ain't happening. And so it doesn't make sense. And again, he's going to go somewhere to rebuild things to hopefully get it to where it was at Alabama when he left. It doesn't make sense. The last thing I would say too with Saban, I think is pretty unique. His legacy is already set, and all he can do is hurt it by coming back. But put aside the fact he's 74 years old. And I was thinking about this, right? So we talked about Belichick earlier. Listen, Belichick, great coach, right? But I think we can all acknowledge, like, Belichick's legacy took a little bit of a hit after Tom Brady left. He wins 6 Super Bowls with Tom Brady, has a great deal of success. Then Tom Brady leaves and immediately wins another Super Bowl. And what happens to Bill Belichick? He kind of stinks, and he ends up, they called it a resignation. He got fired, whatever. So Belichick, I think part of why he went to UNC is he just wants to coach. And I don't think it'll kill his legacy if he sucks at Carolina too. But if he's good at Carolina, I do think it helps his legacy. With Nick Saban, you go somewhere, anything short of a national championship kind of does hurt your legacy, doesn't it? Like, you're already the greatest coach in college football. When you're literally the greatest, there's nowhere to go but down. So to Feinbaum's point, maybe there's a spot in the NFL. But again, he learned the hard way in the NFL. If you don't have a quarterback in the NFL, what does it matter? And the way Nick Saban coaches, even if he kind of calmed down and got soft over the last couple of years, I don't think he wants to coach a bunch of pros. I mean, we all heard the stories about, maybe not necessarily built for the pro game. So Nick Saban, great story, great quote from Greg McElroy. But don't think that Nick Saban is coming back to college. Don't think he's coming back to the pros. I'll say this, certainly made for a great narrative. It would make for a great narrative if he came back to Auburn or LSU as well, but I don't think either is happening. And sorry, Arkansas fans. No, I know John Tyson and the Walton family have a lot of money. Don't think he's going to be that next Arkansas coach either. All right, so what we're going to do, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back when we do. We're going to wrap college hoops. A lot of you love college hoops. We're starting to hit that point where we're going to be a more football-focused show, but I only bring it up because it was a busy weekend in recruiting. We got to talk about where John Shire was, where Dan Hurley was, where John Calipari, Mark Pope, etc. were, because I think it really does speak to where we are in recruiting going into the back half of the summer. We'll take a quick break, come back, talk about it all.
What's up, everybody? It's AT, and listen, I've said it a million times. This podcasting game, it ain't for everybody. It's tiring, it's exhausting, long days, late nights, and sometimes, I gotta be honest, you look like a filthy slob when the day is over. Thankfully, that's where my friends Filebot came in. They just sent me some of their summer line. Let's check it out. Look at me now. Listen, this is the perfect summer attire. We got the short sleeves. It's perfect for podcasting. It's perfect for the beach. It's perfect for the pool. And I just look good. On top of this beautiful linen shirt, we also have the Stay Cool 2.0. Perfect for those hot summer days. Keeps you cool. You can wear it at night. You can wear it during the day. You can wear it again to the beach or pool. So listen, if you want to look as cool and as hip as Torres, this is what I need you to do. Go to Fiobach.com. That's F-I-O-B-O-C, Fiobach.com. And also on top of that, how about this? Listeners of the Air Torres Pod get 20% off your purchase when you use promo code Torres. Promo code Torres, Fiobach.com. Appreciate their support.
All right, everybody. I'm back. Good to be back. So listen, we've talked a lot of college football. If you missed any of the show, make sure to check it out either on replay, whatever. We talked a lot of college football. SEC Media Days have begun. Do think, though, and we talked about Saban, obviously. Do think, though, that there's a little bit of basketball that's worth discussing. Again, for people who are new to this channel, we will be kind of transitioning into a lot more football talk over the next couple months. I'll say this, though, before you know it, we're going to have to start talking basketball again because by October, we're going to start to get stories and narratives, blah, 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 whatever. I bring it up because while college basketball, the news element of it is a little bit quieter, it is kind of worth noting that this is a sort of busy time on the recruiting calendar, okay? And it's a very busy time on the recruiting calendar. Over the last probably 5-6 days, coaches have been on the road recruiting. And oh, by the way, this coming weekend, they're on the road as well. The Adidas tournament is actually in LA. I'm going to try to get there either Friday or Saturday because there's a lot of good players. And so what we do generally in the fall, while it's obviously a busy time in football, we do a lot of college basketball recruiting, kind of talking about visits, this, that, the other thing. And so what I thought we would do today is kind of just go through the big names in high school basketball, the big recruitments, and who is kind of trending for who. It's a little bit early, but it is still worth discussing. So let's get into just what we learned this weekend in high school basketball recruiting, what it means, the big names that you need to know. The first big name, listen, we talked a lot about Tyron Stokes on the last episode. If you listened, we had that mailbag episode of Tyron Stokes. And I mentioned, originally from the city of Louisville, a player that is the number one high school player in America. He now plays high school ball in California. Well, I bring it up because if you remember, I listed 4 schools that I believed were probably the favorites to land him. I said, I think it's going to be one of these 4. And I think even of the 4, I think essentially like 1 or 2 of them probably are on the outside looking in. Okay. Well, I bring it up because what were the 4 schools that I said? I said Louisville. I said Kentucky. I said Kansas. And I think Arkansas is maybe a little bit of a dark horse given John Calipari's ties to the state of Kentucky. Well, I bring it up because he played for the Oakland Soldiers this weekend in the EYBL event. Who are the 4 coaches that were there? Producer Matt, do you have the Jeff Borzello tweet? Jeff Borzello, ESPN, tweets, Pat Kelsey, Bill Self, Mark Pope, and John Calipari, each with an assistant, were in attendance for the number 1 recruit in America, Tyron Stokes. Mentioned that he also plays with Jason Crow, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, kind of nailed it on Friday. Said, I think these are the 4 schools. I think this is who it's going to end up being. Well, Pat Kelsey, Bill Self, John Calipari, and Mark Pope were all there courtside with an assistant. Listen, we don't have to dive too much into this. If you missed the segment last week, you should go back and check it out. We talked a lot about Tyron Stokes. I think it's going to be one of those 4. Already taken visits to Louisville, Kansas, and Kentucky. And I don't know what his time frame is, but I think it's probably going to be one of those 3, maybe Arkansas in the mix. Think it's too early to say there's a definitive favorite. If I had to guess, I would lean Louisville, but I don't think it's like I wouldn't be ready to put in a crystal ball. Like if I was one of those guys that did crystal balls, I don't know that I would put them in that mix right now as a definitive favorite. But those are the 4. I think those are going to be the 4. I know some UNC fans kind of said, well, what about us? I'm not saying it can't be Carolina. I'm just saying that I would guess it's going to be one of those 4. I would give Louisville a slight edge, but not by much. Let's keep it going. Very interesting player that made a very interesting announcement on a visit schedule. That's the guy you can see on the screen right there. Talon Kinney, 5-star, number 1 point guard in America. He plays at Overtime Elite, but it is worth acknowledging, where is he originally from? He's from the beautiful state of Kentucky, okay? And so I bring it up because this is one of the most coveted guards in all of high school basketball. He is going to be 5-star McDonald's All-American, and he, like Tyron Stokes, has already taken some visits. Already visited Louisville, already visited Purdue, already visited Kentucky, and coming into the weekend, had plans to visit Indiana, Oregon, and Texas. Well, I bring it up because coming out of the weekend, he did add a very significant visit to his itinerary. I want to give credit to Sam Lance of Zag's blog because he had this before. And listen, it's going to sound like a criticism or a cheap shot. It isn't. Joe Tipton's great at what he does. Travis Branham, great at what they do. They both put out the visit news on Monday, but want to give credit to Sam Lance, who had this on Saturday, because Sam Lance was the first one to report that Talon Kinney will visit Arkansas on September 26th. Now, that's a noteworthy visit because Arkansas actually plays Notre Dame football at home that weekend. Now, I guess in theory, if things are going really bad for Arkansas, it could be a lousy crowd. But I think John Calipari's thinking that's going to be a rocket environment. I think even if Arkansas isn't good in football, I think the fans are going to show up to watch Notre Dame. Like, how often does Notre Dame come to your home stadium? So I only bring it up because I think that is a noteworthy visit. And I'll say this too, is that I do think that what's interesting to me about Talon Kinney is some of his comments that he has made about John Calipari in the past feel noteworthy to me. Remember, he's from Kentucky, and so he grew up on Calipari's Wildcats. And when he's been asked about John Calipari, he has been basically like, look, the track record speaks for itself. The pros that he has developed speak for themselves. And so, I think there's this insinuation Calipari's trying to get in late. He's a 5-star. He's going to be a Louisville or Kentucky commit. And like Tyron Stokes, like if I had to bet on it right now, I would probably bet it would probably be one of those two, probably with Louisville actually as the slight edge. Talon Kinney's an Adidas kid, Louisville's an Adidas school, whatever. But I think it's pretty clear that NBA track record with John Calipari, I think is going to carry some degree of weight in this recruitment. And what's also worth noting with Arkansas, they could lose their entire backcourt. Is DJ Wagner going to come back for a fourth year in 2026, 2027? Maybe, but who knows? Especially with rev share. I mean, might not be able to make as much money as a senior as he is than as he is as a junior. Darius Acuff, we assume, is going to be a one and done. What about Malik Thomas? And so I only bring it up because there could be a spot for Taylon Kinney to get the ball in his hands at Arkansas. He's visiting October 26th. I don't think we should dismiss this as just, John Calipari's trying to get into the last minute. I would think they have a legitimate shot. Very quickly, staying on John Calipari in Arkansas, I thought this was interesting. John Calipari very active in following and pursuing Jordan Smith, top 5 prospect, guard, number 2 player in the class, according to 24/7 Sports. Jordan Smith Jr. was part of that Team USA gold medal team. I thought, I mentioned this with Tyron Stokes last week. I really liked how Tyron Stokes took on a role with that team. Tyron Stokes was used to being the best player everywhere he's played, but now he's on a team with Koa Pete, with AJ DeBonsa, with Mikel Brown Jr. And I only bring it up because I thought Jordan Smith Jr. did the same of just 2 guys along with Tyron Stokes that are really good, that prove that they can play a role when they're around other talented people. Well, I bring it up because this is a player that John Calipari is very clearly prioritizing. I think right now I would probably say Duke is the favorite, and Duke, I think that's one where I would guess it's going to be a Duke-Arkansas thing. Again, maybe other schools are going to get involved. I'm not saying that they won't, but thought it was noteworthy. John Calipari, that seemed to be one of his priority follows and priority visits was Jordan Smith this weekend, so I think that's worth noting. So I mentioned Duke. There is one other Duke recruit that I think is very much worth noting. One of the more intriguing prospects, in my opinion, in this 2026 class, Cameron Williams from Arizona, plays for the Compton Magic. Okay, so I'll give you a little bit of inside college basketball right now. Compton Magic are arguably the best AAU program in the country. I live on the West Coast. I've been lucky enough to get to know some of the people there. They do as good of a job as identifying and developing players as any AAU program in the country. That's no disrespect. They're just unbelievable. Some of the guys that have played for the Compton Magic: Evan Mobley, Defensive Player of the Year. I remember talking to Atope from the Compton Magic when he was in high school, Evan Mobley. And Atope was like, Evan Mobley's going to be the best big man from the West Coast since Tyson Chandler. Kind of delivered on that promise. Dalen Terry, who's in the NBA now with the Bulls, played for the Compton Magic. Johnny Juzang, who's in the NBA, UCLA and Kentucky, played for the Compton Magic. Koa Pete, now at Arizona, Compton Magic. Elijah Arenas, now at USC, Compton Magic. They have so many good players, and they have 2 really good ones on their 17U team this year. One is Bruce Branch, who's arguably the best player in 2027. The other one is Cameron Williams, 2026. What's interesting about Cameron Williams, first of all, growth spurt. He's now like 6'9", 6'10", but he plays like a wing. 2, the other thing that's interesting about him, not all the recruiting services have caught up on him. Now, 24/7 has him listed as a 5-star, fringe top 10 prospect. Some places still have him as a 4-star. I think he is going to end up being a top 5 player in this class, maybe a top 3 player in this class when it's all said and done. Just gets better year over year, month over month, in AAU, session over session. So like the player that he is now compared to what he even was in April and May is a different dude. Well, I bring it up because, listen, when you're the head coach at Duke, people are going to notice where you are. And I thought it was noteworthy that Jon Scheyer spent a bunch of his time following around, you know what I mean, but Cameron Williams. And this is not a top 3, top 4 prospect currently in the class. And so the fact that Jon Scheyer is prioritizing him means that Jon Scheyer don't care what the recruiting rankings say. Jon Scheyer thinks that's one of the best players in this class, and he is going to prioritize him. So it'll be really interesting. I mentioned this off the top. The AAU circuit comes to LA this weekend. I'm going to try to get there either Friday or Saturday for the Adidas. And, the Adidas has Taylon Kinney. It has Cameron Williams. And I'll be curious. I expect to see Mark Pope, John Calipari, Jon Scheyer out at Adidas this weekend. It'll be really interesting because Adidas is in LA. Peach Jam is in Augusta. And there's going to be a lot of flying back and forth. Should mention with Cameron Williams, too, very early in his recruitment. I don't, just because Duke is, there, I'm not sitting there saying like, it's a done deal by any stretch. He set up a bunch of other visits. Texas, remember, Sean Miller is at Texas now. Sean Miller is a heck of a recruiter. On top of that, he will visit Purdue and USC. I'll add this too. I mentioned it the other day. I was at Eric Musselman's practice a few days ago at USC. Eric Musselman ain't taking a backseat to nobody in recruiting. I think just like Kentucky, they were in the mix with Jason Crow Jr. until this weird stuff with, Jason Crow Jr. going to Missouri. We'll talk about that when he ends up committing, but I think that's certainly worth noting. Haven't mentioned much with Kentucky. Do want to give Mark Pope some credit, though, because I think they're quietly making a move on what I believe to be one of the top players in the 2026 class, Caleb Holt. Okay, so Caleb Holt, another player that was part of that Team USA that just won a gold medal over there in Switzerland. Very good player. He's originally from Georgia, I believe. Now, he's going to Prolific Prep next year, but I want to say he's from Georgia. Yeah, he's from Loganville, Georgia. Okay, so I bring it up because a couple weeks ago, the only real recruiting news that we had was that he had set visits to Alabama and Auburn. Listen, Bruce Pearl, what he's doing speaks for itself. Nate Oates, what he's doing speaks for itself. Each of those schools has made a Final Four in the last 2 years. But Kansas is in the mix, and it feels like Mark Pope and Kentucky, to their credit, are really making a move on this kid. Okay, so he's about 6'5", 6'6". He is a wing. And he actually gave KSR a very interesting quote about his recruitment. Producer Matt was all over it today, so why don't you pop that quote? This was via Kentucky Sports Radio. My buddy Zach Gagon, who does an excellent job covering Kentucky recruiting and basketball. This is what Caleb Holt told Zach Gagon. He said, quote, Coach Pope, he was my on-the-court coach at USA training camp. I got to play for him, and it was actually fun. He let me rock out. He was like, that's how it's going to be at Kentucky. Kentucky is definitely in the mix, high up there. I mess with Mark Pope and everything. Listen, I'm a boring old millennial. When the kid says, I mess with so-and-so, that's always a good sign. And I'll say this too, this is a little bit of that Team USA impact. If you remember, we talked about this during training camp. Yes, Mark Pope wasn't an official coach, but there were a few coaches that were allowed to be quote unquote on-court coaches, which is basically means that the early portion of the training camp, Mark Pope, Nate Oates, Hubert Davis were among those who went out and were part of the workouts and helping him out. And everybody said it, and it was true. If you can have access to the best players in America, that's never a bad thing. And that's exactly what Mark Pope and all those coaches had the opportunity to do. So you talk about the impact that has. I think it's clear with Caleb Holt. It's not a bad thing, and I think it's a good thing. Now, Caleb Holt has officially set up a visit to Kentucky. He will go the first weekend in September, or maybe the second weekend, September 5th through 7th. But why that's noteworthy is because there is an official visit on the docket. We knew he was going to Auburn. We knew he was going to Bama. Listen, we talked about it in the mailbag last week. I know Mark Pope hasn't landed that elite 5-star that isn't from Kentucky. He's gotten Jasper Johnson. He's gotten Malachi Moreno. Didn't get Caleb Wilson last year. Jason Crow Jr. looks like he's going in another direction. I only bring it up to very simply say that this one feels like there's some legs to it. Now, we'll see what happens through the rest of the recruitment. I'm not going to put the cart before the horse, but it's a good sign. I like the quotes. I think it's a good thing for Mark Pope. By the way, one guy that I did not give you the name of, producer Matt, Deron Rippey Jr., kids being recruited, but one of the fastest rising players in America. I only bring it up because he is another guy that Mark Pope seemed to really prioritize this weekend. The quote-unquote issue, if you want to call it that, is that this kid I think he's the Nate Ament of this year from the perspective of he's being recruited by everybody, and he seems to have zero problems taking every visit imaginable. Again, he is a player that is a fast-rising member of the class of 2026, but among the visits that he plans on taking, he will be going to Kentucky in a few weeks. He's also planning on visits to Miami, North Carolina, Alabama, Texas, Syracuse, Indiana, and Tennessee. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 visits that he's got scheduled. I wanted to reference him because obviously, again, Mark Pope, that was another player that Mark Pope prioritized. but it just feels like when you got 8 visits lined up, I don't think we can even begin to speculate on what schools you might be interested in or where you might land. I know North Carolina feels like they're in pretty good shape, but just want to mention his name as well because he is one of the fastest rising recruits in this class. Really quickly, we'll close out on a couple other names, and then we'll get out of here. One, Mika Murinen. So this was a guy, we did an update on him a few weeks ago because there was thought that he might reclassify, but he is from Finland originally, now plays his high school ball in the U.S. It's worth noting on him. Last week, cut his list to 7. Let's see if I can do the 7 off the top of my head. Arkansas, Kentucky, NC State, North Carolina, Michigan, Indiana is 6. I believe Kansas is 7. Let's see if I got that right off. No, Duke is the 7th one. So there you go. Kentucky, Arkansas, Duke, Indiana, Michigan, NC State, UNC. Listen, first of all, there was speculation he might reclassify. I think at this point, it's probably unrealistic to expect that. There's not a spot at Kentucky. There's not a spot at Duke. There's not a spot at Michigan. There's not a spot at UNC. Maybe NC State. I know they lost the Paul Mbaya kid. Maybe they would take him. I don't know. But I think he's going to be in 2026. I only bring it up because the cut is worth noting, especially with the big schools. If I had to make a guess right now, I would actually guess maybe Michigan. He has visited Michigan, Arkansas, and Utah. Utah does not make the final cut. That's kind of noteworthy. I'll go a little inside college hoops again. Utah is coached by Alex Jensen. Alex Jensen is a former teammate at Utah of Hanno Mettila. Hanno Mettila is from Finland. Mika Murinen is from Finland. Long story short, if you need a player out of Finland, Hanno Mettila is the guy to go to. His former teammate at Utah does not make the final 7. Probably not a great sign for them, but Mika Murinen final 7 is out. And lastly, really quickly, because I'm a Husky, just give you the quick Dan Hurley, where was he? I think it's interesting with Dan Hurley, by the way, just feels like it's been a quiet offseason for him. He's finally out of the spotlight. I think the last 2 years, I think really, there was just a lot of media appearances, first pitches. I think he's quietly enjoying being in the shadows. Not as many eyeballs on him. Well, I only bring it up because I think the 2 names that seem to be prioritized for him, Cole Kloer. By the way, I think somebody in the chat last week when we were doing our mailbag was asking about Cole Kloer. Only thing we know right now, 4-star. What's interesting about him, he grew up as an NC State fan, so can NC State get in the mix? Right now, he has visits set up with Florida and Alabama, but it seems as though UConn is trying to get in the fold there. And then the other name, this is one that I am very intrigued by, Abdou Torres. Okay, so I'm really bad with the name, but this is one of the best players maybe to ever come out of the state of Connecticut. High 4-star. He will be a 5-star when it's all said and done. Grew up in Connecticut, plays in West Haven, decided not to take any of the prep school routes. He's playing his senior year in Connecticut. Again, I'm not going to sit here and speculate if UConn is the favorite. Certainly a lot of schools trying to get in the mix with Abdul Traore, however you say it. I so apologize for my UConn people, for my Connecticut people. I'm screwing this one up. But I just bring it up because to me, UConn has very clearly prioritized him. He plays on the Adidas circuit as well. I'll be curious to see if UConn is out in California watching him this weekend. Whew. An hour 8 on a Monday. I'm a beast, man. I'm a beast. Who gives you an hour 8 on a Monday? Just Torres. All right. I think that's it for this episode of the Aaron Torres Pod. If you're not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever. I'm going to take a sip of water. I'm fried. Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you get your podcast, subscribe. Rate, review the show. We appreciate your support. If you're not following on social media, please make sure to do so. What is it? Aaron_Torres, Aaron Torres Pod on TikTok and Instagram as well. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, make sure to do so. I'm going to get out of here. Don't know when the next show will be, only because I'm doing radio a bunch this week, but we'll be back at some point this week to talk more media days and see where the rest of the week takes us. But I'm going to get out of here. By the way, the other reason I'm going to get out of here, it is my wife's birthday. She's in the other room. Got to make sure that she hears that I'm shouting her out we're going to go out and have some fun here on a Monday night. So we're going to get out of here. Appreciate your support. We're going to go. Shout out to Torrin Craig. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, you F-head. Unblock me, bro. I'll be back maybe Tuesday, maybe